Hello, hello. Lyndall Duscan here. That's Lyndall Duscan there too in the video. And today we're going to talk about Eric Norcross, the incredibly talented, visionary, authentic, director that I've had and filmmaker that I've had the pleasure of collaborating with on a few projects, including this video he did for me for I Dared, which is the title track from my recent album that was released on 6/22. So I mainly want to just show my gratitude and appreciation for him collaborating, offering his time, talents, and visions to my song, and explain a little bit of how this video is power packed, and give a little bit of the interesting explanation and history behind it. Because as many things in this album, nothing has been conventional or logical or just laid out in a linear timeline. Um, so I'd love to keep it brief here, but tell you guys a little bit about what's going on and highlight this video that I just sincerely love. So it starts off here in Staten Island. That is a keyboard, a Casio of mine, that is a travel board. And this was in 2022, I believe. I'm going to pause it here. So in 2022, Eric came to me and had some free time after filming an entire full length feature in the middle of the NYC COVID madness. And I was fortunate enough to get to score that for him. And so this was on the flip side of that big project that took a lot of our time and energy for at least a year. It might have been longer than that. And he came to me and said, okay, I have some free time. One thing about Eric Norcross, if you don't know him, he is always creating, and he's been such an inspiration for me, as I believe it's so important as human beings to constantly be creating in one way or another. And he in particular is just a monster when it comes to it. And I've known him for a long time, and he is always creating, and he has several art forms. He's a Renaissance as well, a Renaissance man as well as me, where you just have this creative energy and you find these different channels and you develop these different channels for it. And he is just not slowed down. He is still creating incredible content on many, many avenues, and I will put those links down below. So he came to me and said, let's do it. I'm ready. And what song do you want me to do? And so I picked I Dared because I knew it was going to be the title track of the new album. I had a lot of the music actually fully produced by Colin Hua, who I'll talk about in the next video, and even had the album artwork all set from my own original paintings, that Mary Wages designer that I talked about last week in more detail on my vlog. So all of it was laid out and ready. And so it seemed perfect. It's like, okay, let's do this. And he's collaborated with me on other music videos, Let It All Crumble. And they're pretty big productions, comparatively speaking to my other music videos, including actors, including sets, including storyboards. It's so fun to work with him. But in general, I give him carte blanche. I don't necessarily tell him what the song means to me. I want him to interpret it, because I'm such a fan of his visionary abilities and his ability to pick out things that are a big part of where I came from in creating it. Like he just can intuitively and talentedly pick it up, without ever it being explained to him. But then from another side, he also adds other elements to it that maybe I didn't. And as I mentioned before, my songs are multidimensional, and I don't want them to just be like, it means this, so it has to mean this to you. Like, it really is about how you connect with and what you hear from it. And songs can be portals into the spirit world. And so, spirit can speak to whoever's listening in an entirely different way than maybe the intention, because at the very base of my intention of my music is for it to be helpful personally, and collectively, for anyone who happens to hear it. So this is what he came up with. And he sent me, I believe we did it in one day, but that part I really am not even remembering because it was, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago now. But he picked out 2 locations, one on Staten Island that was more remote and near this historic house that you'll see here. And so this one was more about being out in nature, and it was more about, and then this is the juxtaposition you'll see already of, this remote setting versus being in crowded Manhattan. And he just, though we have storyboards, a lot of it is just about being in the moment. He's improvisational with everything. And that's why I call him such an authentic creator, because he's willing to take the risk, and not have everything controlled by him. And so here's the juxtaposition. I'll stop there for a second, talk about what we just saw. So, we kind of just get together, and I don't have a stylist. I don't have anybody doing my makeup. I just got to carry in a bag with me, on the subway or on a ferry. um, I think I did drive to the Staten Island location, and we just kind of hang out, and I just kind of throw some clothes on. I had a change. I did bring a change of outfits. But as you can see, like, maybe I could use a stylist, but the whole point, and this is what I like working with Eric, he really challenges me on the idea of just being 100% authentic in the creation. Um, this in particular makes me laugh because I don't really look super athletic here as I'm running across the fields. And I remember him just asking me to run, and I didn't really know why. In this outfit, but something I kind of like about it that I didn't intend is I look old fashioned. These are just clothes I had, honestly. But like I said, I threw together and it would work in the situation we were in. But showcases a little bit of my own individuality, and that it's not about me trying to be some sexy, hip looking lady here. I'm just me creating music. And I've always wanted that. Let me pause it here. I have sort of rejected highly this idea of using sex to sell anything as a woman. I mean, I'm coming back to a lot of my feminist roots as I'm standing in my power and my authority to speak truthfully about what feminism is to me, because in reality, especially towards those latter days in Brooklyn and in the last few years, many people have felt bullied by quote unquote feminists, even women, that we're not allowed to have these differing opinions, which is so starkly against what feminism was originally about. First wave was about women being able to be who they wanted and to be a member of society in their particular unique way that was not in competition with men, but was a fuller expression of what society could be when we work in harmony. Because some of that was being shut down and limited for women before that time. And, but it wasn't about becoming men, which is, I guess, what happened in second wave feminism. Becoming men and just, using the same ruthless, aggressive tactics that we felt were abusive. Well, now we're just going to use them back at you, right? And we're just going to start the battle of the sexes, which I have a song about that as well. But so one of the things that I rejected when I stood in my authority and said, I do want to be a musician, which took me a long time because I was a woman that was very much shut down and trying to be what other people wanted me to be, and wanted to, when I have a very maternal instinct. I love children. I would have been perfectly happy just being a housewife, honestly. But then there was the confusing messages, and it did feel like, well, you live in a particular time period where as a woman you get to choose what you want to do. So I stepped into my authority and decided I did want to learn how to create these songs in my head, really ultimately being a songwriter, but recognizing I had to learn music and accomplish music to do that. And at the same time, I didn't want to become so focused on music that I left out these other art forms that were important to me, like writing, photography. It's gone into filmmaking, painting. I just wanted to live the life that was mine to live and be honest about it. And so I can't allow myself to be bullied by feminism, just the way I wouldn't really allow myself to be bullied by men for a long time. But in reality, I've been more afraid of the women, I think, lately. And that's one of the things that I just reject. I don't think as women we have to use our sexuality to be members of society. And when women do that, fine, I get it. But then it's okay if other women don't necessarily be like, oh, these are the women that we should be holding up as the heroes in our society. The Me Too movement exposed a lot of women who were playing victims whilst using their sexuality. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. But I wanted to do here a choice that you don't have to do that either as a woman, even though it works, you know? You don't have to sell yourself. You can be a beautiful soul, or decide to be a beautiful woman without turning it into a commodity and a sexuality. And the same thing is true. You can create beautiful pieces of work just because it's what your soul wants to do, and it doesn't have to be about the trends. It doesn't have to be about fitting into the rat race. So that, bringing back to this video, is a bit of what that juxtaposition, I believe, is about, that Eric is doing, showing that natural aesthetic, the beauty of the historic place, versus then when you get into Manhattan and you get into this rat race. I want to succeed, and these are the things that succeed, and then you sort of like get pulled into these trends and these ways that work, but in reality you're losing your own authenticity as an artist. And so it's that juxtaposition, and it's something that him and I, really related to very early on. We found each other in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of the rat race, and then right at the point where both of us were sort of stepping away from any tendency, even remote, that we were getting pulled into some of this stuff, trying, quote unquote, to make it, but trading your authenticity and your soul to do it, right? It just happens. So I'm gonna keep going here. So here I am, he's once again not just doing what you're told to do. So that's just the idea, like creating your own idea. Became true. And living for real. Living for real. Now, what I love about this is that it's showing unapologetic. In a way, this is choices showing what I did for my late 20s and almost all of my years. Just explored the city and so, it shows me just being out of me just exploring something. I never talked about this. So sometimes 4-hour walks where I would just be exploring these cities, and I just found them fascinating. And I would be doing photos some days, and other days I was just listening to music, and other days I was just thinking. And a good friend of mine's, Mary Wages, actually sent me a ring one time that said the solution comes from walking. And if you know anything about my history, you know that in my late 20s and my 30s, I knew I had to do a lot of personal healing, a lot of personal growth. I had to mature. I had to get past patterns. I had to, stop being this person that was attracted to abusive relationships and abusing myself and self-sabotaging. And so I did a lot of this shadow work, and this was a big part of it. I mean, you can do it in any way that's right for you. But I was so fascinated by these cities, and I would just spend hours walking around these cities just thinking, and then I would come home and have song ideas from it. So without me ever even explaining it, he's kind of showing a process here of songwriting. And that was a goal that we did speak of, that we thought would be cool, was to try to inspire other songwriters through just showing the process. Here I am with my portable keyboard, which I would recommend this Casio as a portable keyboard. I've had a lot of other portable keyboards because that's, great to have a keyboard that you can travel around with and take into inspiring places. But for me, I always want the full-size keys, and this one has like better sound to it than some of the other binky toy-sounding small pianos. But it doesn't really matter, right? This was the keyboard that I actually do use. And then you'll see that I have a notebook here, and he's at times like zoomed in on my notebook. And this is my legit notebook. This was one that was given to me by my cousin when I played at her wedding. But really, in reality, it's the songwriter process for me very quickly, and something I'll explore more. But it's very important as part of my process is to have songwriting. I basically would call them journals. Songwriting journals that I go from beginning to end, and then I start the next one, beginning to end. And I think maybe I'm on like my 5th one, maybe. But I have many, many song ideas, and I don't immediately sit down to write in here. There's a rough draft that just happens on like a sheet of paper before that. And then once the song kind of gels a little bit, then I take it to converting into this notebook. And once it's there forever. Now, some of them, that's as far as they go. And then some of them get taken even further, to a further process, such as this one, I Dared, right? But they all start here and they all live here forever. And it's part of just my process. So, good love is fun. Okay, this is going to be not just doing what you're told to do. For all women. All this is about living for real. I woke up in my early 20s and realized, that I had no idea who I was, but that I heard songs in my head, and that somehow by getting these songs out of my head and actually figuring them out, even if it wasn't to ever go anywhere beyond that process of going straight to my notebook, somehow that made me more of who I was. And if I had discovered these things earlier in life, which very much, in many ways, I regret that I didn't, because I had these callings as a young girl, but instead I got caught up in, a lot of things that I'm not necessarily proud of. And it's one of the reasons I got involved with education and teaching, and in particular girls. For a very long time, it was very important to teach young girls, especially through the preteen age, which is right around the time I quit piano. And I wanted to be popular. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to do what everybody else told me to do. And in my world, there was no real understanding of why you would do music. It just wasn't practical. And I don't know, it just didn't make sense. But I did feel it even then. And I ignored it. And I remember even thinking to myself, like when I was 14, like, oh, I'll have time. I'll just pick it up later in life. Like, it's way harder than that. So the fact, I guess it makes my story unique. When I was in my early 20s and I realized I heard this, and I decided, I had a 9-to-5 job, and it was like really depressing to me. I had a hard time just thinking I'm going to be here 9 to 5 every day, and this is the adult life. And I had a hard time with all of that as a creative, and not being one that fits into time very well or practical things, and just, like I said, had a lot of things to work out on my own. I almost sort of woke up in my early 20s and just realized I'd been sleepwalking up until that point and hadn't made great decisions. And I guess I could have decided it was too late, but I didn't. I dared. And I said, you know what? I don't know why I need to write these songs out, but I do. And the reason I brought that up is because for me, then it entailed, another 20 years of being a solo woman. And that was what was right for me. It really was what was right for me, because it's a luxury in a way to have time to work through your issues and to develop your creativity. And I was late to the game, so I had a lot of work to do to be able to really pull the music that was out in my heart and my head and actually create it and make form. There's a lot of skill that a lot of musical skill I had to learn to do that. And in some ways, there might have been some sort of timeline for me where I could have been a songwriter and a mother and had a family in my 20s. And I see a lot of women doing that, and I encourage that. But also, I guess I just want to say that it's never too late. And even if you feel like you don't make wise decisions, I don't think it's wise to continue to say, like, okay, I already, messed up. I didn't do this calling, so I'm just going to keep ignoring it the rest of my life. I'm an advocate for, no, whenever you figure out it, then once and then you do have to pick it up, and you have to figure out a way to do it. And for me, it wasn't so bad. It really wasn't, because I had all this great luxury time to walk around these cities. And then, I spent 1 year in Paris proper where I didn't leave at all. And I realized it wasn't good for my body. I'm somebody who does need to be out in nature. I believe we all do, but I guess some of us are more aware of it than others. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I know for myself, I had to, after that year, realize that I needed to make periodic trips to nature. And so that was part of what I did. All the time that I lived in these mega cities, I always make sure that I get out into nature and just have time to chill and walk and think and create and write songs, So Eric captured that perfectly. Now, this is the guitar. This is what I'm going to talk about next week. This is Colin Hua is producing, and footage running. I love it because it's just like simple motivation to improve. Once again, Eric really pushes me to put my money where my mouth is, to not just get on here and talk to my students and talk to people about being authentic and not and getting past your perfectionism, which was so much about what kept me from music for so long. So many of us, like, we if it's not going to be perfect, we don't even want to start it, right? And then we don't want to take the risk of putting things out in the world that aren't perfect and being made fun of. And I feel like Eric is so great for me because, you know, he just makes me stay authentic. When I work with him, he makes me stay authentic. And there was even a podcast a few years ago that we did together, and we were jamming in it, and I could not freaking figure out, in the middle of this, could not figure out the chords. And he put it up anyways. And I remember that, he pings me at times like, oh God, why'd you share that? No, why don't you edit that? And then you realize this is what being authentic is, you know? This is the dare. Can you really live an authentic life? Can you really be real? Can you really get past the image, you know? And nowhere is it more tempting to live in an image than in New York City, in my opinion. It is almost contagious to want to get caught up in being who you think you're supposed to be. Okay. And that's why the end of this sort of antagonist.
Is all of
Is this
this
ridiculous?
ridiculous?
Maybe.
Well, maybe, but who really cares about who you're supposed to be?
And yeah, that was the point of the song. It's not really, let me pause it before I show you the last thing. It's not really my position to be somebody who likes to like punch people in the face with truth. Um, I've been too much of a people pleaser, and I've been too much of a woman that wants people to, like a peacemaker. I want people to feel good about who they are. I think I'm actually much better at inspiring people to be who they are, as opposed to challenging them in the ways that they are holding themselves back or not being who they truly need to be, or maybe need like a pop in the face to kind of wake up a little bit. Other people are better at that. As a music teacher, I've gotten really good at that, but I've always been very diplomatic. I've always had, like I said, if I'm in a one-on-one session, I'm pretty good about that. But often I've held back my opinions, and I haven't sort of really, said like, hey, I think like you're an idiot, you know, for doing this or that. But I kind of say that a little bit at the end of this video. I really kind of say like, yeah, like all you people who are taking yourselves like really seriously, like, you know, I don't, I guess what I'm starting to do is just recognize that I need to be a little bit more honest, because when you tell the truth to people, it can be very loving. And if you're always just being too positive with people, then that cannot be loving. So I like that the end of that is a little bit antagonist, and I think it fits to where this is a little bit of a hard rock. I mean, it's not hard rock; it's like a little bit heavier rock, but in a feminine, soft ballad kind of way, which is exactly what I wanted. I'll talk about that more with Colin Hua, like, you know, is exactly what I wanted, because many of the days that I was in New York, I felt like such a freaking badass. Like New York, that's when I say New York has raised a woman where once a girl was, because it did get me out of that place of just being too amenable, almost being like a doormat to people, because I was trying to be so loving and so kind and so forgiving that don't stand in your true authority and your power. And when you do, listen, you're gonna have to have boundaries. You're gonna have to push people off. I mean, New York taught me all of that, and I'm so thankful. And many of those early days, I was wearing these like badass boots I got at a secondhand store, this huge trench, winter coat, walking around these freezing cold streets, and I was listening to Effervescence. It's kind of the vein a little bit, if you can hear in this song. Like, it was just right for me. It was like coming hard, coming into my feminine power, coming into my feminine voice, and recognizing that you need some courage and you need some balls to do it, and always wanting to have a balance with my femininity because I don't want to go into trying to just be a man, right? But I did want to own more of my power. So the last scene is actually my favorite of this whole thing. This is almost like the Faustian deal. If you've heard about when musicians make the Faustian deal, it's showing me at a crossroads, trying to decide. Now, it's not really telling you, uh, I guess technically I'm going left, and I don't know what the symbolism is of that. The left hand path versus the right hand path. That might actually not be the right. I don't know. Like I said, this was all Eric. But to me, the symbolism that comes from this is the Faustian deal. Like, I actually decided not to take the Faustian deal, right? Like, I actually decided not to give up my soul and my identity and my true voice. Um, I decided it was more important to contribute to society in my own authentic way as opposed to a way that could maybe more ensure success or, you know, help me to belong a little more. Um, I just decided that wasn't the way I wanted to go. And I chose the road less traveled. And let me show that last scene one more time because I just love it. There I am, traveling hat, traveling bag. I still wear a lot of these same clothes 3 years later. Always love the Mary Janes. Walking on by myself with my music. That's what I dared to do. I made those decisions in my 20s, and I'm unapologetic for the choices I've made. That's part of the line that I say in there. It hasn't always been the easiest, and I'm not recommending everybody follow this exact path that I did. It's what was right for me, given my particular background and the things going on with me. But I would never say to somebody else, do what I did. It wouldn't work. I mean, the whole idea is we're each unique. And we do so much more for this world and for our fellow human beings when we choose to walk uniquely the path that we were given. And that may or may not mean money. It may or may not mean success. It may or may not mean relationships. But that's where you literally just push your chips all into God's plan and you just say, I'm happy with whatever it is, because the road less traveled these days is choosing to walk with God and choosing to say that you will build a relationship with Him, and through that relationship, your dreams will be fulfilled in a way far beyond what you could control or imagine with your own scheming and your own plans and your own control and coming out of fear, you know. And that's what I've done. And so I don't, in this little circle here talking about this, I'm just thankful. I am thankful that I made that choice. I always say, like, picking up an instrument is the decision you'll never regret. And I stand by that completely. But not everybody is maybe meant to pick up an instrument. I recognize that. In the world we live in, we have to pick our battles. In a perfect world, we'd all play music, in my opinion. But the world we live in, you're going to have to pick your battles and you're going to have to listen to your own heart, what you're called to do. And that is the decision. That is the decision you will never regret. You just won't. So thank you to Eric Norcross for bringing this song to life in visual form. I recommend checking it out. I think it's, can help to inspire you energetically and your thoughts and your heart, because the energy is there. The intention is there. The trueness and the authenticity is there. And I'm starting to realize that, Eric and I were kind of ahead of the game in a way. We really had to go out on our own at the time, but I know there's a lot of young people, a lot of what do they call them, Gen Zers, I think, that are very attracted to authenticity and recognize it, and want to walk in those same paths. I'm even hearing about how they're recognizing, like, you're going to have a hard time succeeding no matter what. So maybe just pick going to college and studying things that you want, But I will say that one of the things that Eric and I both feel very strongly is that you may or may not be able to make money from your art. That's the side thing. But if you're doing art truthfully, the way that you can contribute, then the rest of your life will work out for you one way or another, right? And it will work out even better than some sort of fake life. Or maybe you have the cars and you have the money and you have this and you have that, but you're dead inside, right? Which we see a lot these days. So, yeah, I'll stop there. This is already way longer than I thought. But